The cold wind bit against Daniel's face as he stood outside the small corner flower shop, staring at the bouquet that cost more than he had left in his wallet. His fingers gripped the worn edges of a $10 bill, the very last of his money until the next paycheck, if that paycheck even came. Rent was overdue, his car barely ran, and his little daughter Lily needed new shoes. But tonight, against all odds, he had a blind date, and something inside him whispered that this night could change everything. Still, the thought gnawed at him. What kind of man shows up empty-handed on his first date? That was why he pushed open the door to the tiny shop and used the final $10 he had to buy a single, delicate rose wrapped in simple brown paper. It wasn't much. It wasn't grand, but it was everything he could give. Tricita Luncheon. If this story already has your heart racing, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Be Kind TV. Your support helps us share more real, emotional, and inspiring stories just like this one. Daniel wasn't the kind of man who believed in fairy tales anymore. Life had knocked that out of him years ago when Lily's mother walked away, leaving him with a newborn in his arms and nothing but questions. Since then, he'd been working 2 jobs, fighting to keep the lights on, and giving up sleep to make sure his little girl never felt unloved. But loneliness had a way of sneaking in during the quiet hours. So when his best friend insisted on setting him up with a woman who, as he put it, had a heart of gold, Daniel reluctantly agreed. Still, as he walked into the small Italian restaurant with his thrift store shirt neatly pressed, he wondered if he belonged here at all. She was already seated at the corner table by the window, her posture straight, her presence commanding yet calm. Her name was Claire. She smiled when she saw him approaching, and in that moment, Daniel forgot about the chipped shoes on his feet and the empty wallet in his pocket. He handed her the single rose, and she accepted it with a softness that made his chest tighten. "Thank you," she said, her voice smooth, gentle. "This is beautiful." Daniel almost laughed. Beautiful. It was a $5 rose in a $10 wrapper. But the sincerity in her eyes made him believe, for a brief second, that maybe it was enough. Dinner unfolded with unexpected ease. They laughed, they shared stories. About Lily's drawings on the fridge, about Claire's love for old jazz music. But Daniel was careful, too careful, never letting his struggles slip through. He didn't want pity. He didn't want to look like a man who couldn't provide. He wanted to be seen for who he was, not what he lacked. But Claire saw more than he realized. She noticed the way his hands bore the roughness of work, how his eyes carried the weight of years far beyond his age, and how his smile, though rare, lit up when he spoke of his daughter. Something in him pulled at her, something real, something different from the polished, rehearsed conversations she was used to. Because what Daniel didn't know was that Claire was no ordinary woman. By day she sat in boardrooms, making decisions that moved millions of dollars. She was the CEO of a thriving tech company, a self-made millionaire. To most men, she was intimidating. To Daniel, she was simply Claire, the woman across the table who listened like every word he said mattered. The night ended with a walk outside, the city lights glowing around them. Daniel wanted to offer her a ride home, but his car had broken down again that morning, so he simply asked, "May I walk you?" She agreed, and together they strolled down the quiet street. Claire carried the rose carefully, as though it were priceless. When they reached her car, a sleek, black sedan that Daniel guessed cost more than he'd ever earned in 5 years, he stepped back, embarrassed by the chasm between their worlds. "This was wonderful," Claire said. "Thank you for tonight." Daniel nodded, fumbling for words. I wish I could have given you more." Her eyes softened. She reached out, placing the rose gently against his chest. "You already did." That night, Daniel went home to Lily, who had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for him. He kissed her forehead and whispered a promise he didn't know how to keep. "Daddy's going to make things better." But life, as it often does, grew heavier. His job cut hours. Bills piled up. One evening, as he sat at the kitchen table staring at an eviction notice, there was a knock at the door. It was Claire. She stood there, holding a bag of groceries and that same single rose now pressed between the pages of a book. "You didn't answer my calls," she said softly. "So I came." Shame flushed his face. He wanted to tell her to leave, to spare himself the humiliation. But Lily's little voice rang out, and ran straight into Claire's arms as if they had known each other forever. Over the weeks that followed, Claire became part of their lives, not because she pitied them, but because she wanted to. She helped Lily with homework, cooked meals with Daniel, and filled their tiny apartment with laughter. And slowly, Daniel learned to let someone in again. One evening, while walking together in the park, Daniel finally confessed the truth: the rose, the last $10, the struggles he'd tried so hard to hide. He braced himself for the look of disappointment, but Claire only smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Daniel, that was the most beautiful gift I've ever received. Do you know why? Because you gave it when it cost you everything. Money doesn't make love valuable. Sacrifice does." And it was then that Daniel finally understood. She hadn't fallen for a man with money. She had fallen for the man who, with nothing left to give, still chose to give something. Months later, Claire and Daniel stood together at Lily's school recital, holding hands like a family. Life wasn't perfect, but it was full of love, full of hope, full of second chances.